Have you ever felt that something has been hidden from you your entire life? As if there were a truth so profound that the power structures did everything possible to keep it in the shadows. It was an ordinary afternoon when Mel Gibson walked into that dimly lit room at the Vatican. What was supposed to be merely a courtesy visit transformed into the beginning of a journey that would shake not only the actor's faith, but potentially that of millions around the world. The Holy Shroud has always been an object of fascination, devotion, and controversy. That piece of linen, approximately 4.4 by 1.1 meters, bearing the faint image of a crucified man, has challenged scientists and theologians for centuries. But what few know is that behind the published analyses, radiocarbon datings, and official explanations, there is something much deeper, something that religious authorities fear to reveal. Can you imagine the weight of carrying a truth capable of transforming the history of humanity? Gibson felt that weight when, after years of quiet research and discreet meetings with experts who spoke only on the condition of anonymity, he realized he was facing something that transcended ordinary understanding. When you look at that fabric, Gibson later revealed in an interview given to a small trusted circle, you're not just seeing a relic. You're looking at a code, a message that has spanned 2 millennia to reach us. And the most frightening part is not what we have already discovered, but what we still dare not see. The room seemed even colder as the special curator showed Gibson documents rarely seen by anyone outside the highest ranks of the church. Photographs in various light spectra, microscopic analyses, ancient texts with interpretations never before revealed to the public. The silence between them was broken only by the occasional rustle of turning pages. You might be wondering, why Mel Gibson? Why this man, known for his Hollywood career and his controversial film, The Passion of the Christ, was chosen to have access to such carefully guarded information? The answer may be simpler than we imagine, because he was willing to look. Because while many in the film industry sought merely to entertain, Gibson pursued something deeper, a connection with the divine through art. And now, faced with those documents, he felt the first tremor of a truth that could change everything. There's something in the fabric, murmured the curator. Something that we cannot explain with our current science. Something that perhaps should never be explained. What would you do if you were in that room? If suddenly the curtains of history began to draw back, revealing a mystery so profound that merely contemplating it could forever transform your worldview? Gibson made his choice at that moment, a choice that would take him to places he had never imagined, both geographically and spiritually. When night fell over Rome, he left the Vatican with a folder of documents and a promise of discretion. What he was about to discover was not just about history or religion. It was about you, about all of us, about the true nature of the reality we inhabit and the invisible forces that shape it. Thus began the journey that would lead him to the heart of the greatest secret hidden within the Holy Shroud. The airplane cut through the night sky as Gibson leafed through the documents. Complex formulas, strange diagrams, and texts in ancient languages filled the pages. What was beginning to emerge from that information challenged not only conventional history, but also the very laws of physics as we know them. Can you feel it when a truth resonates with something deep inside you? Even before you fully understand it, it's as if every cell in your body recognizes what your mind is still trying to process. That was the sensation that overwhelmed Gibson as he connected the dots of that millennial puzzle. The Holy Shroud has always been regarded by the faithful as the cloth that wrapped the body of Christ after the crucifixion. For skeptics, it is an elaborate medieval forgery. But what if both sides were wrong? What if that fabric was, in reality, a kind of record, a map, a technology for which our ancestors had no words to describe? The image on the shroud was not painted, it was not burned, and it was not printed by any known method, explained one of the reports signed by a physicist whose name Gibson had never heard before. The image is confined solely to the outer surface of the fibers, with a maximum depth of 0.2 micrometers. No known human technique could have created this, especially in the 14th century when the first historical evidence of the shroud appeared. But that was only the beginning. The real secret lay in the hidden patterns, visible only under specific light conditions and magnifications. Patterns which, when decoded, revealed something so extraordinary that the few scientists who studied them preferred to remain silent, fearful of the implications of their findings. Have you ever wondered why certain relics are kept so far from the public eye? Why some artifacts are displayed only for brief periods under rigorously controlled conditions? Perhaps the answer lies not just in the fear of damaging them, but in the fear of what we might discover if we studied them freely. Gibson landed in Turin the following morning. The Italian city that houses the famous Shroud appeared calm, oblivious to the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in the actor's mind. He had an appointment with Elena Visconti, a researcher who had devoted 3 decades to studying the relic, though her work was rarely cited in the official literature. The cafe chosen for their meeting was on a narrow street, far from the curious eyes of tourists and paparazzi. When Elena arrived, Gibson immediately noticed the heavy look in her eyes, the gaze of someone who carried a burden of deep knowledge. "Mr. Gibson," she said as she sat down, "before we begin, I need to know, are you prepared to question everything you believe about our existence? Because that is exactly what the Holy Shroud demands of us. Can you imagine what it would be like to have your worldview completely redrawn? To discover that the lines separating science and faith, physics and metaphysics, are far more blurred than you ever imagined?" Elena opened her laptop and showed Gibson something he would never forget: microscopic images of the Shroud's fibers that revealed patterns resembling mathematical codes, sequences which, when analyzed with advanced algorithms, produced 3-dimensional models of molecular structures impossible to have known in the Middle Ages, or even now. "What we are seeing," she explained in a low voice, "is something that goes beyond our current understanding. It isn't just an image, Mr. Gibson. It's a message, a technology, a proof." "Proof of what?" asked Gibson, feeling his heart race. Elena's eyes met his with a disturbing intensity. "Proof that we are not alone. We never have been, and that the history of humanity is far more extraordinary and dangerous than we have been allowed to know." At that moment, Gibson understood why this was called a dangerous secret, not because the knowledge could cause physical harm, but because it had the power to restructure the very pillars upon which we build our understanding of reality. And you, are you ready to take the next step on this journey? To step through the veil that separates the known from the unknown? The secret of the Holy Shroud was only beginning to be revealed, and its impact would be deeper than anyone could imagine. Night fell over Turin as Gibson pondered the implications of what he had just discovered. His hotel room had become a sanctuary of reflection, its walls covered with notes, prints, and diagrams that Elena had given him. Every piece of that cosmic puzzle seemed simultaneously absurd and perfectly logical. Have you ever felt as if you were standing at the edge of an abyss, knowing you must jump but fearing what you might find on the fall? Gibson was exactly at that existential tipping point. "The pattern in the fibers," Elena explained, "contains mathematical sequences that describe the structure of human DNA with extraordinary precision, but with subtle differences that no contemporary scientist can fully explain." What did that mean? That the Holy Shroud was not only a record of a historical moment, but a coded message about the very nature of humanity? And if so, who or what left that message? Gibson grabbed his phone and called a number that the Vatican curator had given him, instructing him to use it only in case of absolute necessity. "I found Elena," he said when the call was answered. "I need to know the rest. I need to go deeper." The silence on the other end was broken by a heavy sigh. "There is a monastery in the Alps," the voice finally replied. "A place where some of the greatest thinkers in history retired when their discoveries took them too far. Go there. Ask for the manuscript of Paracelsus." Have you ever felt that you were being guided by forces greater than your understanding? When coincidences align so perfectly that they seem orchestrated by a higher intelligence? Gibson began to experience that sensation as he drove along the winding mountain roads. The monastery did not appear on any tourist map. Hidden among snow-capped peaks, with stone walls that seemed to grow organically from the mountain, the place exuded an aura of ancient wisdom and carefully guarded secrets. The abbot who received him had clear eyes that seemed to see through the layers of confusion and doubt now surrounding Gibson. "You have come because of the Shroud," he stated, not as a question. Gibson nodded, unable to hide his surprise. "Many came before you," the abbot continued as he led him through corridors lit by torches. Scientists, theologians, world leaders, all seeking answers to the same questions that now occupy your mind. The monastery's library was a treasure trove of forgotten knowledge. Manuscripts believed lost, texts and languages long considered extinct, and at the center of it all, a table with a single open book. The manuscript of Paracelsus, introduced the abbot, was written in the 16th century by a man who was centuries ahead of his time. A man who also studied the Shroud and reached conclusions that, even today, few dare to accept. The yellowed pages contained elaborate diagrams blending human anatomy, astronomy, and alchemical symbols, and at its center, a detailed drawing of the Holy Shroud, with margin notes referring to something Paracelsus called the stellar seed. Can you imagine the sensation of reading words penned 5 centuries ago that described scientific discoveries so precise they could only be made in our time? It's as if the past were reaching out through time, offering answers even before we knew what questions to ask. Paracelsus believed that the Shroud contained evidence that humanity was visited. The abbot explained cautiously that our DNA was modified at some remote point in the past, creating a link between us and something beyond this world. What you see as a religious relic, he saw as proof of an intervention. Gibson felt a chill run down his spine. A divine intervention? The abbot smiled enigmatically. Divine, extraterrestrial, interdimensional. The names we use depend on the paradigms of our time. The fact is that Paracelsus found in the Shroud evidence that we are not exactly what we believe ourselves to be, and that our history contains chapters that have been deliberately erased. Hours turned into days as Gibson immersed himself in Paracelsus' writings and the comments of others who had followed his path over the centuries. At some point, he realized he wasn't merely reading about a theory. He was undergoing a profound internal transformation. And you? What would you do if you discovered that your existence is part of a plan far greater and more complex than you ever imagined? Would you continue your quest for the truth, or prefer the comfort of ignorance? For Gibson, no other choice remained. The veil had been lifted, and behind it lay a universe of possibilities, terrifying, fascinating, and irresistibly alluring. There is more, the abbot said on the morning of the 4th day. Something that even Elena does not know. Something that explains why this secret is considered dangerous by those who hold power. The next step of the journey would take Gibson to the heart of the mystery, and to confront truths that few humans were prepared to face. Snow fell softly outside as the abbot led Gibson to a section of the library guarded by an ancient oak door. The air inside seemed denser, charged with the weight of ancestral secrets. What you need to understand, the abbot began while retrieving a key hanging from his neck, is that the true secret of the Shroud does not lie solely in what it reveals about our past, but in what it predicts for our future. Have you ever wondered why certain discoveries are suppressed? Why some pieces of knowledge are deemed too dangerous to be shared freely? It is not always out of malice or control. Sometimes it is to protect humanity from truths for which we are not yet ready. The door opened to reveal a circular room with walls covered in symbols that Gibson had never seen before. A script that seemed to flow like water frozen in time at the exact moment of its fall. In the center, a table displayed a 3-dimensional model of the Holy Shroud, every fiber rendered in microscopic detail. In 1978, explained the abbot, a group of scientists obtained permission to study the Shroud using the most advanced technology available at the time. What they discovered officially is already known. Details about how the image was formed, analyses of the bloodstains, debates about its authenticity. But what was never disclosed were the spectral analyses that revealed an interference pattern within the fibers. Gibson leaned closer to the model, watching as certain points glowed with a subtle luminescence under the special lighting of the room. This pattern, the abbot continued, when decoded using algorithms based on the Fibonacci sequence, reveals a series of astronomical and temporal coordinates. In other words, Mr. Gibson, the Shroud does not simply record a past event. It maps future events. The atmosphere in the room seemed to change, as if the abbot's very words had physical weight. Gibson felt his heart race as he grasped the implications of that revelation. Are you telling me that the Shroud is some kind of prophetic map? The abbot moved over to an ancient telescope mounted near a narrow window. In 1054, Chinese astronomers recorded the appearance of a guest star. What we now know was a supernova explosion. That explosion is mapped on the shroud, Mr. Gibson, just as the planetary alignment that marked the beginning of the Renaissance, the appearance of Halley's Comet in 1986, and events yet to come. Can you imagine discovering that a 2,000-year-old artifact records astronomical events with precision that would only occur millennia later? How would you react when faced with evidence that time might not be the linear progression we think it is, but something far more complex and interconnected? The men who created this room, the abbot continued, concluded that the shroud is not merely a relic left to record the passage of an extraordinary being through our history. It is a communication device, a bridge between different points in time and space, and more importantly, a warning. Gibson felt the weight of those words like a mantle on his shoulders. A warning about what? The abbot adjusted a mechanism on the shroud model, and the lights rearranged themselves, forming a constellation that Gibson did not recognize. A warning about the moment when humanity will have to make a choice that will determine whether we continue our evolutionary journey or remain trapped in self-destructive patterns. And that moment, Mr. Gibson, is much closer than we imagine. The ensuing hours were an immersion in knowledge that defied the limits of modern science, traditional theology, and accepted history. Gibson learned about ancient civilizations that reached technological levels similar to our own, only to succumb due to misguided choices, about the true nature of human consciousness and its connection to the quantum fabric of the universe, about the dormant potential in our DNA that, when activated, could completely transform our experience of reality. And through it all, the Holy Shroud remained a constant, a beacon across time, left by beings who understood that, eventually, humanity would face a cosmic crossroads. Why show me all this? Gibson finally asked, his mind struggling to process the myriad implications. Why me? The abbot smiled gently. Because you have already touched millions with your art. Because you have the ability to translate complex truths into stories that resonate deeply within the human soul. And because, according to the patterns of the shroud, your path is intertwined with this knowledge in ways that transcend rational understanding. Have you ever felt that you were placed in a specific time and place for a particular purpose? That all your experiences, successes, and failures were preparation for something greater? The secret is dangerous, the abbot concluded. Not because this knowledge can cause harm, but because it has the power to liberate. And nothing threatens the established control structures more than truly free human beings, aware of their divine potential. When Gibson left the monastery the next morning, he carried not only extraordinary knowledge with him, but also a mission that would completely transform his life, and potentially, the future of humanity. What would he do with that knowledge? How would he share such a profound secret without inciting panic or disbelief? And more importantly, how would he help humanity prepare for the choice that was coming? The answer awaited in the next chapter of his journey, a journey that now, inexorably, had also become yours. The following days were a whirlwind of revelations and connections for Gibson. Back in the United States, he began to gather a small group of individuals who could understand the implications of what he had discovered. Unconventional scientists, open-minded theologians, visionary artists, people whose minds were not limited by dominant paradigms. Have you ever felt that you are part of something truly transformative? That every fiber of your being vibrates with the recognition that you are witnessing the birth of a new era? It was that energy that filled the room when Gibson finally revealed everything he had learned about the Holy Shroud. What we have here, he explained to the group gathered on his secluded property, is not merely a scientific or religious discovery. It is a reconnection with knowledge that has always been present, yet was deliberately obscured. Reactions ranged from initial skepticism to silent reverence. Dr. Sarah Kaplan, an astrophysicist who had left her position at NASA after experiences that she could not explain within the current scientific paradigm, was the first to voice what many were thinking. If what you have discovered is true, Mel, then everything we thought we knew about our history, our purpose, and our place in the cosmos must be reevaluated. Gibson nodded gravely. And that is why this knowledge is considered dangerous by those whose power is built on established narratives. It is not just a matter of religion or science. It is about control, about the fear of a world where human beings understand their true potential. Robert Chun, a specialist in quantum physics and Eastern meditative practices, examined the photographs and notes Gibson had brought. These patterns in the shroud, he observed, are strikingly similar to those we see in deep meditative states, as if the fabric had captured not only a physical image, but the very essence of consciousness in a state of transcendence. Have you ever noticed how great truths tend to unify seemingly disparate fields of knowledge? How the same fundamental wisdom can be found in quantum physics and ancient spiritual texts, expressed in entirely different languages. What the Shroud shows us, Gibson continued, is that the division we make between science and spirituality is artificial, a limitation we impose upon ourselves due to fragmented knowledge. The beings who left this message, be they time travelers, interdimensional entities, or manifestations of what we call the divine, understood reality in a unified way. The conversation stretched through the night, with each participant contributing their unique perspective, every angle revealing new layers of meaning in the mystery of the Shroud. For Gibson, it was like witnessing the awakening of a new form of consciousness, not just individual, but collective. Yet not everything was revelations and discoveries. As the group delved deeper into the knowledge contained within the Shroud, disturbing questions arose. If this artifact truly mapped future events, what did it imply about our free will? If previous civilizations reached this same critical point only to collapse, what guarantee did we have that our destiny would be different? And more troubling still, if the transformative power of this knowledge was so great, who would ensure that it was not used destructively by those whose interests were purely selfish or materialistic? Have you ever felt the weight of the responsibility that comes with profound knowledge? The understanding that some truths, once known, cannot be unknown, and that such knowledge fundamentally transforms who you are and how you relate to the world? There are risks, Gibson admitted when these concerns were raised. There are always risks when we venture beyond established limits. But the greatest risk of all would be to allow humanity to remain blind to its possibilities, unaware of the critical choice that lies ahead. On the morning of the third day, as the sun rose over the mountains, the group reached a decision. They would not reveal everything at once. That would only provoke rejection or, worse, an attempt to suppress the knowledge. Instead, they would develop a gradual dissemination strategy, using various forms of art, science, and communication to prepare the collective consciousness. Gibson, with his influence in the film world, would be fundamental to that process, not through explicit statements or didactic documentaries, but through stories that resonated on the deepest level of the human psyche, stories that awakened that intuitive recognition of a truth that transcends rational intellect. What we are proposing, he concluded, is not a new religion or ideology. It is a return to an integrated consciousness that is our birthright, a reconnection with the knowledge encoded not only in the Shroud but in every cell of our being. When the group dispersed, each member taking with them a piece of the puzzle to develop within their field, Gibson remained alone, contemplating the sunrise. The weight of responsibility was immense, yet for the first time in a long while, he felt completely aligned with his purpose. The dangerous secret of the Holy Shroud was not dangerous because it caused harm, but because it demanded transformation. And transformation always begins with a choice that you, now that you have learned part of the secret, will also have to make. The ensuing years saw a subtle yet profound change in Mel Gibson's work and public life. His new projects, seemingly disconnected from one another, contained layers of meaning that resonated with the knowledge of the Shroud without ever directly mentioning it. Carefully crafted interviews planted seeds of questioning without revealing the source of his inspiration. Have you noticed how some works of art seem to speak directly to your soul, awakening memories of things you have never consciously experienced? It is as if they activate a knowledge that has always been inside you, merely waiting for the right stimulus to emerge. That was exactly what Gibson and his group were achieving. Not a bombastic revelation that would be quickly dismissed or sensationalized, but a gradual awakening of the collective consciousness, a preparation for the moment of choice that the Shroud had foretold. On a quiet autumn afternoon, 5 years after his visit to the Alpine monastery, Gibson received an unexpected phone call. "They are ready to display the shroud again," said the familiar voice of the Vatican curator. "And this time, they will permit new examinations using technologies that did not exist in previous analyses. We believe the time has come." Gibson's heart raced at the news. Why now? What has changed? The silence on the other end was broken by a contemplative sigh. "Perhaps your work has been more effective than we imagined, or perhaps time itself is accelerating toward the moment the shroud foretold. Either way, there's a growing consensus that humanity needs this truth now." The following months were a complex choreography of scientific, diplomatic, and spiritual preparations. The original group had grown, incorporating people from all cultures and traditions who, in some way, felt called to participate in this historic moment. Can you imagine being part of an event that could fundamentally change the course of human history? Not through conflict or domination, but through a radical expansion of consciousness? The public exhibition of the Shroud was announced as a celebration of its historical and cultural value. But for those who knew how to look, the new examination protocols, the technology specifically developed for the occasion, and the discreet presence of key figures revealed that something far more significant was at stake. On the eve of the exhibition, Gibson met again with the abbot, now visibly older, but with the same penetrating eyes. "You have done your part well," the elderly man said, observing the crowd already gathering in Turin. "You prepared the ground without alarming those who would fear this change." Gibson looked out the window at the people below, ordinary people from every corner of the globe, drawn by something they did not fully understand, yet resonating on a profound level. "Are they ready?" he asked, unable to hide his apprehension. "Are we as a species ready for this knowledge?" The abbot smiled serenely. "Readiness is an illusion, Mr. Gibson. No one is completely prepared for the truth that transcends our paradigms. But necessity has created its own urgency. The moment predicted by the Shroud is approaching, and humanity must make its choice with eyes wide open." The next morning, as the Shroud was carefully displayed under controlled conditions, something extraordinary began to occur. New analytical instruments, calibrated to detect specific frequencies and patterns, revealed what had remained hidden for centuries. A complex matrix of information encoded in the very fibers of the cloth. And as that information was processed and shared in real time, a wave of recognition swept over humanity. It was not merely an intellectual understanding, but a deep resonance, as if an ancestral memory were being activated. Have you ever experienced that moment of absolute clarity when a fundamental truth is revealed, and you realize that, on some level, you always knew it? It is as if all the pieces of a cosmic puzzle finally fit together, unveiling an image that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. The following days saw an unprecedented transformation in collective consciousness. It was not the chaos some feared, nor the fanaticism others predicted, but a silent and profound awakening, a reconnection with the wisdom encoded not only in the Shroud but in our own DNA, in our most ancient spiritual traditions, in the fundamental patterns of nature. The dangerous secret of the Holy Shroud revealed itself, not as an external truth to be feared, but as a mirror reflecting back our own divine nature, a reminder that we are, and always have been, far more than we thought ourselves to be. For Gibson, watching this global transformation from the very monastery where his journey had begun, there was a sense of a cycle completed. He had been chosen not for being special, but for being available, for being willing to look beyond the veil and bring that vision back to a world that desperately needed to remember its true nature. And now, dear reader, the same choice is presented to you. The knowledge that has reached you through these words is not merely information to be filed away, but a seed of transformation planted in your heart. The true secret of the Holy Shroud does not lie in Turin, nor in the pages of ancient books or in the conclusions of visionary scientists. It lies in each of our ability to recognize our connection to something greater that transcends the limits of time, space, and a separated identity. It is found in the present moment, where all genuine transformation occurs, in the choice we make at every moment between fear and love, between separation and unity, between remaining asleep or awakening to our unlimited potential. The time foretold by the Shroud is not some distant point in the future, it is now. And you, like Gibson, have been called to participate in this extraordinary moment in the evolution of human consciousness. The question is not whether you are ready, but whether you are willing. Willing to see beyond the self-imposed limitations. Willing to remember what you have always known in your heart. Willing to embrace your true nature as a being of light in human form. Because in the end, the most dangerous secret of all is also the most liberating. You have always been far more than you ever believed. And now is the time to remember.